Let's summon attention for how to teach sword fighting effectively.
Come on in close because we're not going to talk loud because it's late and we got to talk all day tomorrow.
I can't wait to learn teaching.
Alright. So where you want to start? You want me to start or you start?
Glad to start.
Okay, there, go for it.
Hello everybody, I'm Bhakdar.
I'm Glen.
He teaches a professional teacher. Fantastic. I've been teaching in sword fighting since maybe 2003-ish. We are going to break down tips for effectively teaching at your local park or effectively teaching with training partners. I'm going to try to outline, use the meta of what I'm describing to you as we go. We're teaching. I'm going to try to do it effectively. Can everyone see us where we are? Can everyone hear us? Okay.
Thank you.
I invite you to check that if you have an audience course. And also, as you have an audience course, line them up so you can see them and they can see you, right? Make a rainbow around yourself is a good physical spacing setup. Another good plan I like to use is outline the basic fundamentals of what you're going to talk about first, and then you get into details from there. Some people call it hourglass format. Here's the broad overarching theme we're going to talk about. Teaching sword fighting effectively. We're going to get to a microcosm of examples, the narrow point of the hourglass, and you broaden back out. What's the overarching best and most important stuff everyone's taking away? It's going to carry on that they've actually learned and they're going to use. So this is that outline. I would say outline the concepts, demonstrate them. They've got to be in action, right? We can talk about sword fighting, but until you're swinging the stick with it, we'll not apply it. So concepts, demonstrate, have live practice of it, then troubleshoot. Hey, where'd you run into trouble doing this thing that may be fairly new and you've never done before? Actually ask your questions. What are you running into? Ask your students, what are you running into? Adapt to that, re-respond to that, have that practice updated and live in practice, review it, debrief it. How many of you guys may have been with an instructor today who really tried to narrow in later in their class? What's one particular thing you learned, or how are you going to have a top one or two things to take away with you? Yeah? Yeah. Focus on your learning nuggets before you let people be, or it's just going to be an information overload. Have them repeat it out loud back to you.
Actually, a couple of notes on that too. Especially as you get better and better as a fighter, right? I know we've got at least one warlord here. And so you'll be doing a lot of teaching. And you get this temptation, you're like, wait, do this. Okay, well that's not technically right because there's actually some subtlety, and then you start telling them more and more and more because you don't want to tell them something wrong, right? You need to give them a simple concept, not everything you know about throwing a pocket stab. You're like, here's the motion for a pocket stab, done. Don't be like, and then there's an exception, you have to watch out for this. Don't do that. You need to be very focused and very specific. People can't remember a lot of stuff, so you want to keep to a small subset of things, right? Your nuggets need to be golden and few.
So that brevity is valuable in making sure they're getting it, and then you're seeing them take away a new skill because you watch them drill it in front of you or watch them live practice it. And then debrief, right? Do that review and debrief before you have people leave. And that's my outlining a class.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have your, hand me your copy of your notes again. Oh, is that your only copy?
Yeah.
Okay, then never mind. So one thing that can help when you're outlining your class is like notice we both have handouts, right? Well, they're not handouts, they're hand to us. So yeah, normally I actually bring handouts, but I've had a very busy month at work, so I didn't get a chance to do that. But have an outline, and that should be your guideline. It helps you stay on focus. Make sure you've timed how long you're going to spend on each thing. Bhakdar mentioned activities. Avoid the lecture trap. This is a lecture class, so there's no activities here. But in a fighting class, fight, fight, fight. Talk about something, practice the concept. Talk about the next thing, practice the concept. And handouts are really handy. The more complex thing you want to cover, better the handout. Also, that's where you can put in all the little details that you don't want to bring up to turn a 5-minute explanation into a 2-hour explanation. Put it in the handout, right? People with the handout, a lot of them will throw it away, but some will take it home and they'll read it, right? Some it'll become an heirloom. I actually ran into someone today and they're like, one of my friends has one of your handouts from 10 years ago. We've been passing it around for a decade. And I was like, holy crap. It made me feel really proud. So yeah, handouts can be really useful.
I would build on that by saying try to encompass a broad variety of learning modalities. When I say learning modalities, I mean hearing, seeing by visual demonstration, and then kinesthetic practice, moving your body to learn the principle. I like to try to apply on the scale of combat anywhere it can be used, right? Single sword sparring, single sword in a tournament, single sword in a ditch, let's say, right? Multiple contexts. If depending on your scope, great, but if you're trying to cover the whole thing of something as broad as single sword, maybe you break it down in multiple areas you can apply it. And then as much as you can, teach people through asking questions to keep them actively engaged. Who here has heard one principle about effective teaching that they recalled from some other teaching or guiding type experience? They've already heard it from us talking today. Raise your hand. Okay, great. I got you kinesthetically involved just by thinking, have I done part of this? Am I retaining part of this?
No, I got nothing on that part.
So cultivating active participation balanced with talk. Too much chat will never result in applying the bat. Especially in what we do, get them moving it. The body must learn to be able to retain it. Demos are a very relevant thing. Anyone have a sword handy on them?
Yeah, right here.
Thank you. I could have been a better prepared instructor by bringing my own, right? But let's say, can I have a demo buddy for a moment? I'm not actually going to whack you.
Do you need another sword?
No, we're just
Okay.
fine. Okay, lightning, right? If I am teaching lightning about throwing an outside wrap shot, should I be framed up with lightning in this posture and stance that we are? No, why not?
Because all I'm going to remember is how much you hit.
Yes, I'm teaching lightning to be afraid for their shoulder, right? Look, they're cringing, right? Now, what might I do instead? Hey, lightning, will you please come over here? Hey, would you be my demonstration partner? Okay, can I demo on you?
Of course.
Okay, so we're gonna put this outside, and it doesn't matter what I'm showing you. I'm just saying, now we are aligned. You're gonna hold the sword this way. You're going to set up an outside wrap this way. Get them learning alongside with you. How many times have you seen, even maybe a good fighter at your local park, though, this is how you do a wrap shot, right? Is this person learning the wrap shot? No, are you guys chuckling? Raise your hand if you're chuckling because you've seen this nonsense. Yes,
I'm chuckling because I've screwed up and done it.
Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, so teach with your participants, not on your participants, to the point you can help it. Also, if you're demonstrating something, especially for that pocket stab, for example, I'm going to recruit a fellow instructor at the event I'm at. Hey, okay, now when I do the stab, they're going to follow along, having a sense of what I'm talking about. And that's more likely the more advanced or complex material. Train demonstrating on someone who's going to follow you and work with you naturally to get what's going on. Not like, okay, no, I need you to stand like this so I can demonstrate like that. Does that make sense? It's such an easy meta picture thing to overlook, but you're decreasing the retention in your audience.
One note, actually, when you break out for the activities, is you're going to have to pull people back in. You don't want to run on too long, people stop doing it and start talking because it gets them out of the class. What you want to do is you basically want to leave them wanting more. When they get to the point where everybody's had a chance to do it, they've had a chance to process the thing, but they're still involved in the activity, pull them back in. And you may have to be like, hey guys, come on, bring it back in, we're going to move on to the next thing, right? They should be short, succinct, enough time for people to experience it, but not enough time to get bored with it or to just let it drag out your class. Because a lot of people, once they get to the fighting part, will want to do that for the next 20 minutes.
So even if you were just saying something about, let's look at the foundations class and how it may have been affected. Can you guys imagine if you did that whole foundations 40+ minute demo without a stick in your hand? Who would have gotten bored and just started chatting or walking away? Okay, that was very relevant material, but did you notice the instructors had, okay, pick up your own stick, put your guard in it, put your stance on, right? Actively having the people embody as you're demonstrating something. I want you to do this with me. So even if you're showing something in front of a group, you can have your audience up and doing it with their gear in hand with you. As much as you can too, when we get in that demonstration stage, whatever it is, if Glenn and I are demonstrating, and let's say it's lefty versus righty, or something where relevant angles are pretty, lefty versus righty. Are we just going to stay here? especially let's say swordboard, let's demonstrate it from this angle. Oh, let's swap.
Let's swap.
Then we're going to demonstrate it from this angle. Why?
And you can see your hand.
Because then it matters.
Yes, so your audience can see both sides. And how many times have you maybe had to raise your hand in the class and like, wait, can you show me that from the other angle? Or can you show me that with your offhand? Or, yes, follow? If you're a student, ask those questions. Get it to happen in front of you. If you're an instructor, try to pause yourself. Hey, wait, have I shown this to every handedness it makes sense for? To every body type here in class it makes sense for? Does that make sense? Again, that's engaging your audience and catering to their need to actually learn it for their body style, their style.
And on the topic of questions, a lot of times you have to instead of use questions, because no one wants to ask questions, which is unfortunate because every time someone asks a question, there's like 4 other people like, thank God you asked it, I couldn't bring myself to do it, right? So a thing you do as an instructor is you can point at people. You say, Lightning, do you have a question? Right? Or better yet, you say, Lightning, give me a question. Right? And it helps also if you do like a no Lightning so I can put her on the spot and she won't feel bad. But in a lot of my classes, I go around and I make people do questions, right? I'll be like, all right, here, give me a question, right? And I'll work through the crowd by forcing them to engage. And sometimes they'll be like, I don't have a question. And you go, okay, that's fine, right? And then you move to the next person, right? You don't want to make anybody feel bad.
So we're kind of back to that learning loop. Did you guys notice we described some things and we demonstrated some things and we asked our class audience, have you experienced these things? Let me pause there. Any questions, comments, concerns about what we've already just been talking about? Any questions about that? Okay, and now we're living that learning loop. If you repeat that general loop 2 or 3 times in the course of delivering whatever your content is, you'll have more audience retention and you'll build drilling that later takeaway. Wait, what's the golden nugget my reflective audience is actually thinking? The thing I'm learning is this, and I can show it to you right here with my sticks, or I can say it out loud to you in these check-in points with your class. Make sense?
No, that's okay.
So everyone give me, I'm gonna give you an invitation. Take a pause, take 10, 20 seconds, a few breaths to yourself. What's 1 or 2 top golden nugget things that you've learned about delivering teaching content and sword fighting in the last handful of minutes? Something that stood out to you, something if you're teaching someone at your local park or you're gonna be up to teach some class somewhere soon, you would wanna use. And let's go around the room a little.
Okay, yeah, well, mine is kind of like an answer, but also kind of a question. Earlier you had said that you don't want to inundate your students with too much information, right? And that makes sense. I was curious to know how do you determine what is the most appropriate information to convey to people in the class versus like what's too much, like what's going too in depth and so on? Is there, what's the thought process that leads you to those conclusions? And then what are those conclusions, I suppose?
I would answer that it depends on your audience dynamic a lot. If I'm more advanced audience, I'm gonna jump over the fundamental stuff that we did as everyone. Like, we're gonna go right to that pocket stat, or right to that, I'm gonna set up a mirror shot dynamic through whatever bait response, da-da-da. Okay, so like, I'm gonna skip the broad overarching, the broadest part of the hourglass, the broadest part of the themes. Let's get to micro moments in time. You're going to try to gauge the skill of who already shows their understanding level at what level, and then push the next edge of that is how I would.
Yeah, and I'd say that the key part of that is if they already know a bunch of stuff, you can still mention it, right, just in case you need to brush up, but you're looking for just a couple new concepts, right? So 2, 3 new things. If you're like, and then this, and then this, and then this other thing, another thing, now I just hit 4 new things. But if they know those 4 things, right, and part of that is, like in some of my classes, ask me how many orders of the warrior they have. It gives me a very rough but quick estimate of people's skill, right? Sometimes also, like especially the second day, I've spotalized people, right? I try actually at an event like this, I try and go around and just fight as many people as I can. If you're teaching at your home park, you probably have already a rough idea, or even your home kingdom, a rough idea of your skill level. So you can then be like, oh, okay, you guys are pretty new, I'm gonna start with some low level stuff, and really the newer they are, the less you can tell them, because they don't have things to connect it to. One of the ways we store knowledge is by connecting this web of things we already know. If they have nothing to attach it to, they can pick up 1 new concept and they're lost. If they got a whole bunch of things they can attach it to, they can pick up a lot of things. Like if you want to teach Bhakdar something new about fighting that he didn't know, you could probably go into a lot of depth because he has all these things already he can connect it to. right? So that's kind of the longer answer.
Shorter, simpler golden nugget for the newer, less experienced,
Yeah.
so they take it away. More nuanced detail for the more experienced. Yeah, great question. I love it, and I like that. Ask whether order the Lord or how long have you been fighting as you do an intro circle.
Sure. So you have like a mix of people. You have like advanced people and beginner people and like intermediate. Do you defer in one direction or another, or?
I'd say that was a golden nugget takeaways. What's one reiteratable theme that everyone can always brush up on? That's where I'd
Yeah.
Okay.
And occasionally I will then mention something like I'll be like, and here's an advanced thing. If you don't have that, if you don't have this stuff, don't worry about it. But here's and I'll do that real quick because I don't want to lose my new people. But I'll just throw like a little extra nugget out there for high people, right? So like for the pocket side, I'll be like, and you can throw it as a reverse or backhand dark side too. And my advanced fighters already know what a backhand stab is. My other fighters don't. I'll be like, if you don't know that, don't worry about that. That's something we'll cover next year when we talk about fighting again.
So that started by audience feedback. Golden nuggets you're already learning.
The concept of kinesthetic engagement and like actively trying to keep like the neurons firing, the synapses firing, like actively here in the conversation, thinking about the material while it's being taught. Because like, you take it just sits in your head and it's information, but when you take it and you think about it and you like the thing of asking people to ask a question, like it's forcing them to think about, even if like I think I get this, all right, let me think extra, I don't get that one little bit in there. So just kind of it's the concept of keeping people fully engaged with frequent stops of like, do you have a question, do you have a question, do you have a question?
Totally. And I would build on that, like let's say you have sparring pods or you're gonna do this drill in pairs. Have the drill pairs. Okay, explain to your partner in 30 seconds the biggest thing you're learning from this drill. That can be a micro takeaway in a small microcosm where they get to capture that, and you can still bring it back to a big group of 12 to 20 people. All right, tell me 20 seconds or less each person, what's your takeaway? And now you're having them repeat it more, and they're going to retain it that way. Yeah, other good food for thought on what you guys are already taking away as we're talking.
But you were saying about stand next to the person and let them play along standing next to you. That's, if I'm facing you right, I have to mirror what you're doing and flip it all around.
Yep.
But if I'm standing next to you, it's just easier to copy.
Yep, so copy body alignment alongside rather than contrasting.
I think the one that stood out for me was making sure that you kind of approach all different types of learning, making sure that everyone understands it, whether it's left-handed fighter or right-handed sort of just making sure they can understand the concept the same way. It's it'll kind of think about it long term, like oh yeah, that's something that you totally do when it comes down to practice. I've done it. I'll be like, oh, it's this, and I kind of forget about the left hand flow. Someone will ask me. I try to make sense.
So taking the golden nugget or the core theme and applying it to each modality your audience is using. So let me take one of those meta pictures again. You guys have heard me using a lot of what's called reflective listening. When we just did this checking in with multiple people in an audience, I paraphrased the main theme of what I'm hearing your comment as to say, yes, I'm hearing this. Am I getting that right? Do you guys notice that as well? So that's something you can do again. And we delivered. Did you retain? You're showing me you retain? Yes, you retained. This is it. Great. Proceed. And that can even be your content check, let's say, before we move on to the next golden nugget.
No, you're doing great at this.
Really good class. Flatter your co-instructors. They'll love it. Yeah. You've got a lot more culture stuff if you want to go in there.
When we get to a point where we can fit that in.
Yeah.
So I have a slightly different approach, not to how I teach, obviously, because this is all good stuff. But my focus for what I was going to talk about here and add into Bhakdar's great material is some things about mechanism training, some of the culture behind training, how we train people. And one of the things, like how many people here go to a fighter practice? Right? How many people at their fighter practice do ditching? How many people at fighter practice do battle games? Okay. How many people at the fighter practice do drills? All right. So drilling is the best approach. Sparring, actually battle games would be the worst way to learn fighting. Still fun, I'm not knocking battle games, right? They're great, but they're not for practice, they're for playing, right? Ditching, second worst way to train. Sparring, third worst way. Best way, is drills. And the reason for that is if you're sparring, and maybe I'm working on my defense, right? Working on a block, right? My blocks suck, but I have amazing footwork. I'm not getting hit because my footwork is protecting me. And you can't tell where the problem is. I've been able to mask a problem with another skill set. Or I can mask a problem with another problem. Right? So, like there when I crushed my hand. So, we want to have drills that isolate skills down to a very specific thing. So we're practicing that one skill, that one piece of what we're doing.
Would the best way to be learned by integrating drills and sparring?
So, great question. So once you've done the drill, you need to move back up to integrate it into your fighting. And depending how isolating the drill is and how much you've done it, you may have to have an intermediate drill. Like who here knows the block strike drill?
Yeah.
How many people have done the block strike drill? How many people have done a lot of the block strike drill? Right? So one thing you may notice you've done a lot is you start taking turns when you're fighting. The block strike drill in a nutshell, you start very close to your opponent. You can say something. But you start about this close, right? And Bhakdar and I are both tall. I was teaching with Draknar earlier, so now I'm mixing your names. And then basically you pick two targets, right? Like forearm here, back body here, and you take turns throwing shots. I throw a shot, he blocks, riposte, then I block, I riposte, and the idea is to do it at speed. It's not block, it's block, riposte, block, riposte. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn a skill called reading. You're trying to learn to read their opponent. You're not trying to hit the person, you're learning to read, interpret their shot coming and block it, right? The problem with that is you're taking turns, and I've run into people who've done a lot of block strike, and if I throw a shot, they will throw, and then they'll wait their turn, right? So you have to do an integrating drill, right? In fact, I came with integrating drill because all the rogues I lived here do so much block strike, where you throw feint strike, it's block feint strike, and that helps break that chain, right? So you may have to do integrating drills. Otherwise, yes, you can just bring it back into your fighting with sparring, right? But that's after you've worked the drill to practice it. So you're drilling subsets of skills. Another important thing is that, and we actually didn't mention this, classes need to be at least somewhat fun, right? Most people don't have the drive to go, this is boring, but I'm gonna become a warlord with the least fun ever, right? And I'm just gonna train anyway. I actually met someone like that. It has not had a good impact on their personality, but they just sucked it up for like 7 years of training and had no fun for 7 years. Like, why are you doing this? Like, I'm gonna be good. And they did become a warlord. But
are they here at the CBN?
I do not want to give any information about them. Whether here or not, I would not answer.
Nice try.
But the point is, it has to be fun. That's how you keep people engaged, and that's how we grow our fighting community, right? So you've got to make it fun. Another important thing, and this is probably the most important thing when you're teaching, is you have to tailor it. That's the word I'm looking for. Eventually, I find the right T word. You have to tailor it to the people you're teaching. How many people here, when they started fighting, the first thing they were taught was how to throw a shot? Right? How many people here, the first thing they were taught was how to block a shot? How many people here, the first thing they were taught was how to close on an opponent? How many people here are short? There's some other short people not raising their hands, right? Just kidding. But the point being, if you're short, being able to hit the other person doesn't help a lot because you have to get there, right? At my height, being able to hit the person first, that's great. They have to get there for that, right? I'm already there, right? But if I'm dealing, like I've taught a lot of women's fighting classes, right? I try and focus on defense, closing, right? These are things they need to know before they can hit someone. And a lot of times that's not even taught, right, initially, right? Body mechanics, right? If you are Bhakdar size and full of rippling muscles, and very handsome, then compliment your co-instructors. Then you can throw a shot like this, right? If you are much smaller, say lightning size, you cannot just throw a valid shot like this, right? And I've seen, this was a while ago, but I've seen a warlord teach a short woman to throw a shot like this, right?
That's how I was supposed to talk to throw a shot.
Yeah, yeah, and it was probably completely useless to you.
Yep.
So that sort of tailoring, know your audience. And there are a lot of gender differences, right? And gender, the spectrum, right? Well, they're gendered differences, right? That's the way that the literature teaches when we look at sports psychology, right? And it's not saying all women are this way, all men are this way. It's saying here are two ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Women tend to be here, men tend to be here, but everybody's gonna be somewhere in that spectrum. For example, switch my list here. How many people here like to basically fight it out? It's like hierarchical. Who's the top dog? Like when you run into a new fighting place, you want to fight it out and find out if you're better than the people or they're better than you, and you want to show them you're better. How many people have that kind of modality to it? A couple hands. How many people would rather just kind of find it, like make friends, find out where they connect in that web of relationships, right? That is traditionally a more feminine modality. That hierarchical modality is very masculine. And you notice a lot of AmpGuard is focused around that masculine modality, right? It's all about, like, we don't do 10 and talk. We do first to 10. Very competitive, right? That's a hierarchical thing. I am better than you or you're better than me. 10 fights and then talk about it, that's us hanging out, having 10 good fights, not keeping track of who's gonna win, but then giving each other feedback, right? How many people here are competitive?
Yeah.
Okay. Turns out that's a cross-gender modality, right? There's this common belief, oh, women are as competitive as men. No, they're just as competitive. But there are a whole bunch of, in fact, got a whole page of things that have a more feminine modality, so you'll find it more often in women. It doesn't mean men can't have it, doesn't mean all women have it, but you'll find it more often in women. And there's a bunch you'll find out real often in men. And if you go through this list, I have a bunch of copies if people want some. Or I can also, if you just message me on Facebook, I can send you a copy, right? But you go through it and you're like, oh, the right side is AmpGuard, which is the masculine side, and the left side is, we should do some of this shit, right? I bet the women at my park would like this one, right? So like one of them is Alone at the Top, right? A lot of fans, like it's always the top of the mountaintop, the warlord just crushed all his opponents, right? And that's a very masculine mode. I am very much the masculine for a lot of stuff, so I really thrive on that, right? I'm better than everybody else and I push them, not push them down like in a mean way, but there's a hierarchy and I'm a top and everybody knows it. For other modalities, especially women, right, or that feminine modality, they would rather be in a web of connectedness, right? They don't want their success to separate them from the pack. They want their success to connect them to their friends. They want their successes to be something their friends celebrate. Don't push their down or push their friends away, but make their friends go, awesome work. You did that for us. We are now winning more stuff. So a lot of stuff there on that. But that is so important because so much of our training is male-centric, and it's not intentional, right? It's because this game has a lot of dudes in it. Most of our warlords, but all but one of our warlords for the first 30 years, right, were dudes. And when SKBC came around, it was a bunch of dudes who were warlords trying to figure out how to teach, and they taught stuff that worked for them. Right? So there's a lot of built-in masculine modalities that aren't intentional, but there's a tremendous amount of institutional sexism in AmpGuard. And no one's done it on purpose. No one's like, I'm a sexist, women are bad, right? Well, okay, someone might be. But there are all these things, like, we're not even aware of them, right? And I've run into women, they're like, yeah, and this. And I'm like, doesn't that seem like it's really this? How about this other way? And they're like, well, that would be better. I never thought about that. So it's not, like I said, it's not a gender thing. There's a whole commercial on that, so I'll switch off that topic. Because that gets back to our don't belabor your points, right? So some additional stuff on kind of cultural things, right? There's coach-centric and there's player-centric. Coach-centric is kind of like what you did. You did like youth soccer or baseball or t-ball or any of those things.
Yeah.
A few people, right? You had the coach, he had you run drills, right? He told you what to do and then you did it, right? That's a very coach-centric approach. A player-centric approach empowers your players or your students to make some choices about their training, right? Including like which drill they're going to do, right? In my lefty fighting class, I was like, here's a couple shots. I want you guys to pair up now and use a couple of these shots, but I left it to them to pick. Like if they weren't comfortable stabbing people, which some people aren't, they can throw the shot. But we had a couple shots where it gives them a little bit of empowerment about their training, makes them more invested. And the more long-term you're doing this training, like you're training your park week in, week out, you can again start building some of this player-centric focus into it. Let me switch back to you because I'm talking.
I've delivered most of my content. We have a comment here.
I was going to ask, would you, because you use the term empower very specifically in reference to player-centric training, would you say there are advantages to point out about coach-centric training?
Yes. So there are a couple of advantages to coach-centric. One, it's easy, right? And that's not bad, right? Because most people here's job is not to coach amp guard, right? If you're teaching a class, you're doing the goodness of your heart. You're taking time out of your day or your event to teach a class, right? And also, it requires less effort from your students. And a lot of people are like, they're here to fight, but they're not like, I'm here to train and teach me stuff, coach. They're like, all right, well, I'll just, tell me what to do, right? A lot of people are a little more passive about how they want to train. That's perfectly fine. Everybody's here to be a warlord, right? You're here to have fun. That's the whole goal, right? Although, if you do get to be a warlord, often you'll get flown out to places for free to teach. So you can get some free vacations. But beyond that, it's quick, it's easy, it's very straightforward. A player-centric approach takes a lot more effort and often takes more setup, and it takes a more invested audience. So, great question. Thank you. Other questions?
Maybe not necessarily the scope, but like, so I recruit through a school, right? So we get freshman people every year. Our retention is really low, and part of the problem is, obviously, the people who are more motivated, get better, they stay. The people who don't tend to leave. What are the things besides, individually, trying to get those people's attention, like in a wide class setting? What are things that I can do to kind of balance it out?
I'd pitch. There's a lot of dynamics at play there. If your part can accept and acknowledge this skill gapping piece around recruitment is widening that gap it makes it difficult to have a fun culture overall. I've seen parks, if you fought 3+ years, you're going to start the open free-for-alls with single sword. Well, anyone else can use open full gear. Or, this kind of bar leveling, some intro fights, bar leveling, some vets versus. If you've been fighting 5+ years, you're going to go to that side, you're going to be outnumbered 8 versus 18 to balance the odds. Like, you can structure games at your park to kind of customize some of that, but I'm with you, that's an everywhere challenge, right? Yeah.
And one thing that also helps is building connections, right? Most people very few people are like me. I don't care if I know anybody. I don't care if I like anybody. I am there to hit them with sticks, right? And yeah, but
I agree.
That's not that I'm saying I don't like you people, right? In fact, I'm hosting a net. My wife and I are hosting a net because we like her that much. But if I didn't like Annette, I would still be totally happy fighting her, right? So, but those connections, right? Like, it's not really related to fighting, but going out to dinner afterwards. Go somewhere cheap. Go to Hungry Howie's or one of those terrible pizza places, right? But tying them in so they feel part of the group makes them want to stay.
The culture part.
Yeah, and tying into fighting, making them feel like fighters. Right? This is again another place where AmpGuard has done a terrible job of serving its women. Right? Is women are often othered. Right? They are not treated like fighters. I've seen this with my own wife. My wife is an excellent fighter, highly accomplished, and I've definitely seen her, like someone comes up and asks a question, we're both standing there, and I'm pretty good at Florentine, but she's a Florentine specialist. That's her favorite style. So if you want to know how to kill a sword and board guy with Florentine, I'm going to have you talk to my wife, Kiara. But they came up and they asked a question about Florentine, and I just sang because I knew she had the answer. So she gives the answer, and he was like, so Glenn, what do you think? And I was like, well, I think that. But that's a really common thing. And so that sense of building community and making sure that they feel heard and make sure they feel like a fighter is going to be important to not just keeping players, but keeping them interested in fighting. Once people start thinking of themselves as a good fighter, they will become a better fighter. They will focus on it. There's a lot of research actually in this idea of like natural, like who here has heard of like someone's naturally, like Wayne Gretzky was naturally talented at hockey, or so and so is naturally good at a thing. Right? Yeah. How many people believe there's such a thing as natural talent? Nope. All right, a couple of you. And a couple of you are like, I feel like this is a loaded question. I'm not following you. Right? Because the answer is there isn't. There are genetic advantages. If you're 7 feet tall, you have a basketball advantage, right? If you're 4 feet tall, you have a basketball disadvantage. But as far as a natural predisposition, there's a tremendous amount of research that shows there isn't. Look at guys who are good at baseball. Ask them when they were born. they were probably born at such a point that they were the oldest kids in their class when they started playing baseball. So when you're, 6, between a 6 and a 7-year-old in coordination is huge. So the 7-year-old's like, oh, Timmy, you're so good at baseball. So Timmy's like, I'm good at baseball. So he practices more. He gets more play time. He tries more. He's encouraged more.
More attention from the coach.
What's that?
More attention from the coach.
Yeah, more attention from the coach. And then Timmy goes and plays in the
Little League Championship.
Yeah, Little League Championship. He eventually goes on to college, etc. Because he was encouraged, and he then thought of himself, and he self-identified, right? I'm doing active research for self-identification as scientists. But he self-identifies as a baseball player. If you can get your players to self-identify as amp guards, self-identify as a up-and-coming fighter, or a fighter who's serious about fighting, right? Those are things that make people stay involved. If you don't make them think of themselves in a way, they leave.
Another question. Beyond the cultural inclusion part, that word left my mind, in something like a sparring context, how would you, if you are a veteran fighter, help someone think of themselves, a newer person, as a fighter, without just like seeming like you're not taking them seriously?
So that's a great question. Is this a tournament or just sparring?
Just sparring.
Just sparring.
Not a tournament.
Yeah. So, first of all, sparring, I always go 100%. Right? Now, that doesn't mean I just murder newbies left and right. Right? I do because I'm an asshole. No. No. What I do is I will do different things. I will work on the stuff that I need to work on. Right? If I'm fighting a raw newbie, I'm like, what is the thing I'm absolutely worst at? Right? That's what I'm going to work on. And often that'll be a defensive thing. Right? Or there's a drill I do. It's called block 3. Right? Or it's block X. I usually pick 3. And I will block 3 shots before I throw anything at the newbie. Right? Which one makes them feel like they're getting some stuff, they're getting shots in, right? 2, especially when I'm coupled with something else that I'm bad at, they're gonna win some. And when they win, it's not because I let them, because people can tell if you're playing down and letting them win. And then their wins feel hollow and useless, and that's discouraging too. Right? Every person who has ever beat me earned it. Right? And I've been beat a lot, right? By all skill levels. So that is one of the best things to do. The other thing is being very positive about their fighting. When someone kills you, good job, nice shot. Especially if it was a nice shot. If they did something clever, that is a time for praise. Right? And there's a very strong tendency, it's definitely faded a lot over the years, but it's still there in better fighters when they get killed by a bad fighter to try and minimize it. Oh, I wasn't really trying hard. Oh, you got lucky. I guess I'll take, that's the one I hate most. I'll take that. I guess I'll take that. Right? Yeah. Every time someone says it, I'm like, if you say it again, I'm gonna hit you so hard. I would never say it's an amp guard, of course. Right? That's what I say at SCA only. But either take it because it was clean, or don't take it. But don't be like, I'm gonna give it to you. And I hear that a lot, and I especially hear it to women. Right? So that's again the thing you can do to help build that emotion. Great questions. Thank you. Other questions?
So if we have a situation in a fighter practice where we have like a core group of people who's like up with the drills and they're like attending regularly, and then we have like a new person who's like basically a brand new fighter, and they're like jumping in and not really following along with like the drills that we might be doing or whatever, like what is a good way to like step back and draw that person in to like help them participate and like get up to speed without like necessarily stepping back like the whole class? Or is it worth it to do that?
Bhakdar, you want to take that one?
Okay, I think, did I track, it's like how are we developing one person who's struggling to keep up and kind of without taking the time of the whole as much? And I think that's about this inclusion thing and identity, and then how can you get that community of buddy, veteran to newer person. It doesn't always have to be right there in that moment if the bigger group needs to go on to something. But there's got to be a conscientious effort of the veterans of, yeah, we get along well, I'll coach them on this, or kind of what coach to audience buddy system and inclusion system helps promote. And it doesn't always have to be at the full group scale. It can be in those micro pocket scales.
Okay. And sometimes also you can have one of your people do some teaching, right? Because you don't have to be a warlord to teach. In fact, teaching is one of the best ways to learn. You have to take stuff that you kind of know, right? And then you have to explain it in a way that a new person can understand. And you'll be like, and then you, oh crap, how do I do that?
Oh yeah, right? Isn't that called the Feynman method?
I don't know the technical name.
Okay.
That's outside my research area. but I hope it is, because then we can use that also. So thank you. But yeah, teaching is really important. Does anybody here know Arcadia? Plays bell and tag? He used to be my squire. And when I was up in Ohio, training him basically put me on a rocket path to war. Right? I didn't improve a lot during that time I was in Ohio, but I learned so much training him, and it solidified my fundamentals so strongly that I got warlord within a couple years of moving to Texas. And became a really amazing, awesome dominant warlord. Like, I'm incredible, right?
Yeah, you in Texas though?
That's true. I am. I'm the warlord of Texas,
I'm
and
sending
that
him
was
this clip.
because of teaching. If I hadn't taught ARC and worked with ARC and spent all that time trying to break down stuff I knew and teach it to somebody else, right? Who wasn't a high level. I wasn't teaching from the beginning. I was teaching another high level fighter, but that really gave me such solid foundations for my fighting and my learning. So you can market that to other people. Be like, hey, why don't you show him some stuff? That'll really help your fighting out.
I would kind of want to build an echo on that. If you're one of the better fighters at your park and you feel you're stagnating, if you're not teaching everyone else to up to your level, you are being part of capping yourself. The second you infuse more energy to teaching the next 20%, so to speak, of skill level just beneath or around you to maximize or get past you, you are now teaching them and your future self. And the more intermediate people you can get teaching newer people, now the intermediates are solidifying their fundamentals while newer people are building them, and the more advanced people you're teaching your intermediates up to pushing back on the advanced, now we're in a self-perpetuating system where your whole park keeps coming up.
So, question building off of that, it's come up a couple of times while I've been a park. What do you do if you see an intermediate fighter teaching not useful things to a new player? And
this is how you leg check.
I'll just let you take it from there. But having seen it a couple of times, like what do you do at that point? We're like, so none of that works.
Check this out. What do you think, Glenn?
I've got an answer. So there's a couple things, right? So if they're being generally helpful versus if they're just being annoying. Right? Because again, I'm gonna keep tying this back to women, but I've done so much training with women. I see so much stuff. Some guys like, I'm gonna go teach her because then she'll sleep with me. Right? Like, they don't say that, but you can see it in their head. Right? Those people I have no courtesy to at all. I'm like, you're wrong. You're an idiot. Stop teaching her wrong. Right? I might say that once, but I will definitely say that. Right? Usually they'll take a hint. But the other approach is the yes and approach. And this is actually a good way you deal with students when they say something in class or they have an idea, you ask a question and they give an answer. Most answers are never 100% wrong, right? If they are, you can be gentle about it. You'd be like, well, that's a good thought, right? Still start with something positive. That was a good thought. I liked what you're thinking about that, but that's not actually the direction we want to go. Where we want to do is this, right? And you can use that same thing by going over there and helping with that. Now, if that person considers you a contemporary and appear like an equal level fighter, it's harder to do. But if they know that you're better than them, then they were often willing to go, oh, okay, yeah, you should definitely listen to Bhakdar. He's better than me at this fighting. So he's got that. That was definitely right.
In a class or an on the point, on the mark in the moment session, let's say as we're teaching, don't just deflect. That yes and is, can I build on that? Let me hear how you would explain it to someone. Okay, yeah, I like this part, and can I build on that?
So going off the same topic, I run into a lot of people that don't have the drive to learn. Like they express that they want to learn, but they don't show up when you host night practices. They watch the videos, but they don't ask questions about them, etc. Like I can't get the people around me to go from complaining about being how bad they are to actually putting in the work to learn how to be better.
So I've got two things for that, and then I'll turn it back to after I've taken the easy answers. Is one, make it fun. right? And so maybe you turn the drills into maybe some sort of competition. Like one thing that I think Termis did, it might have been Jaylee, one of our warlords did it in the wetlands, is he had this competition. He made headbands, and they were hilariously bad headbands. They were like headbands with a Sharpie number on it, and you could challenge another person for their number, right? But you could only challenge up to, right? And so it became this thing, and people were like, hey, you want to fight? All right, let's fight. And they fight headbands. And that made it fun, because it was a fun community. People that normally aren't interested in doing that were like, hey, I want to. And the other thing is, they were very proactive. They were just like, hey, if people want to ask, they'll have to ask, right? They'd be doing it, and somebody'd be like, what are you guys doing? They'd be like, oh, we're doing the headband competition. Come on, we got a headband, come join, right? Sometimes when you're doing fighter practice, you'll be like, hey, you want to fight? They'll be like, no. What you want to do is you want to say, hey, you want to join? You go over, you give them a sword. You don't force it on. You're like, here's a sword, come fight with us, right? Not, do you want to join? You're invited, not even you're invited to join, come do this thing, right? So they feel very included. A lot of people don't want to be imposive, they're not good at it, they feel awkward, so you have to be extra positive and inclusive. My second point I forgot, so I'm going to pass it back there while I try to remember.
I concur. I think that's the right kind of stuff. Make it more about community than we're getting a grind on this thing. Yeah.
All right, I didn't have time to remember other points. If I remember it, I will post it somewhere. Excellent, great. That actually, before we go to our next question, is a good point. All the instructors here, we like talking about fighting, right? So you can hit us at events, hit us here. If you see us, we're ditching, we're sparring, unless we're with other students. But if we're sparring with each other, or we're just like in the lines or whatever else, right? You can totally come by and be like, hey, I've got some questions, right? That's why we're here. We want you to do that, right? Some instructors are also a little bit shy, so they're not going to go around and hunt down students and be like, hey, let me fight with you, right? But they love it when people come up, right? We've actually had, I don't say fights because we're all friends, but we've definitely had shove the other warlord out of the way when someone asks questions while I'm in the wetlands. Like someone came up and asked a question, and Jaylee was like, oh, Jaylee has to sit down. Because we want to teach. And by that same token, you're all invited. You invite me on, hit me up on Facebook. I'm Glen MOP. You can message me other ways, but Facebook's certainly the fastest way because it's a network. So definitely hit us up for questions. Yes.
This may be a student issue and not a thing a teacher could deal with at all, but today in the student build pods, the first few people I thought, I don't think any of them are here, but I tried to express this at the time. So there was a format of 5 per counter, and then an instructor would give some feedback. And the instructor would give some advice, and then my training counter would say something along the lines of, well, you know, I feel like I have to be careful with those, which I don't recall asking them to be careful, but they felt they were getting kind of a low quality experience because they were holding themselves back to be careful. I felt a little bit frustrated that I was also getting not their A game.
Not their A game.
How would you try to head off that dynamic or intervene in it if it's happening?
Great question, Bhakdar.
Did you have anything that you tried in the moment, or that you thought I might want to say or ask to change the dynamic?
The third time it happened, I decided it wasn't a coincidence, and I said something like, you know, thank you, but please feel free to fight me normally.
Good advocating for yourself. I think we all got to speak up and ask for what we want, or we won't get it. And in some way that's overly simple, but I get the dynamic you're playing. It can be an uncomfortable ask, and yet if we're not speaking for what we need, we probably won't get what we need.
And I will say too that as an instructor, you almost have a duty of care to your students to be the one who says that uncomfortable thing, right? Like if I had heard that, and I'm pretty oblivious, so I didn't. I'm sorry.
I was never in your pod.
Oh, good. I'll yell at the other instructors. That's your job to step in. If someone says something shitty, it's your job to be like, hey, that's not acceptable, right? If someone says, oh, I don't want to hit her hard, right? Your response is, are you hitting everybody too hard? And if they say yes, you'd be like, well, then you need to check your swings, you're gonna have to go sit down. And if they say, well, no, but I don't want to hurt her, you'd be like, well, she's not made of tissue paper. You can fight her like you would fight anybody else, right? And if they can't do that, that is a problem with them, and you are dealing now with a problem student, right? And you can be nice about it. Don't be like, you're a jerk, but address it, right? Because a lot of times they're kind of like, she's smaller than me, and I'm this mighty strong guy, and I don't want to crush her, right? So are you hurting the other players? No. Then you can fight her the same way you fight them. And that is, as the instructor, one of your jobs. And that is unfortunately, again, I'm sure you actually, how often do you get that?
So many times.
Yeah. If you've got women in your class, you've got smaller fighters in your class, you're gonna get that, right? And it'll often be from these guys who aren't particularly good, right? Because I very rarely hear a warlord say that, right? Although you may have heard that from some warlords, so I don't want to negate your experience. But from my experience, and I want to get yours after this, it's usually the mid-level to low fighters that say that, right? Oh, I don't want to hurt her. First, I'll hit her. Right? So, but yeah. So, have you gotten it from Warlord too? Have you gotten it from all levels?
No, go ahead.
I've occasionally got it from warlords, but you're right. It's a lot of the time. It's if I win a fight, they might comment that I could have done some things that they didn't do, that I didn't want to. Or they'll do the thing of, okay, I'll take it. I understand you can't play with powers.
Yeah, that's it. If it makes you feel any better, I've actually gotten that a couple times. Oh, I didn't want to hurt you, Glenn. Well, thank you for your consideration. But it happens rarely enough to me. It wasn't irritating, like I'm sure it is to you.
This is actually to qualify your statement about it mostly coming from mid and low level fighters. I remember reading a study. I would need to double check the data exactly, but it was in the context of competitive video games. And it was demonstrated that people who were worse, if they perceived themselves as being beaten by someone who is below them, i.e. a woman or like a younger person, they would be like, that was shit. I didn't want to, I was holding back. I didn't want to commit or whatever. And more skillful opponents would be like, oh yeah, good job, you did this thing. So there is statistical evidence to suggest that people who are bad don't want to feel worse about being bad.
Other questions? Well, unless I can't see him because it's getting dark. I think we're about done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I do have 4 copies of my notes if anybody's interested in them.
Can you post them online?
Yes. All right. 1, 2, 3 hands. I got a 4th copy.
Yeah.
4th hand was fastest.
Sorry, you have a copy. I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to wanting to teach a class, how well do you feel you have to have an understanding of a subject before you feel comfortable writing an outline and creating a class on it?
Better than the people I'm teaching. That's it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And that's actually a common problem. People are like, well, I'm the best friend in my park, but I'm not very good, so I don't want to teach. Right? And as Bhakdar said, first you're hobbling your own advancements, right? Hugely. And second, you're keeping your park from getting better, and that would also make you better. So yeah, if you can teach it, and it's perfectly okay to like come up with some ideas, and then if you know somebody who's better, run them by them, right? Reach out to one of the warlords here. Be like, hey, I'm teaching this class. Here's my ideas. What do you think? Right? A lot of times they'll be like, these are great notes. We'll use this. Or we'll have you give you some feedback, right? And because there's nothing wrong with teaching somebody something that's wrong, as long as you don't do it authoritatively. Like, yes, you always want to rotate your wrist out when people throw really hard shots, right? This is actually the fall position that leads to most wrist injuries. People land like this and it bends their wrist back. So this is a terrible block. It's not so bad in amp guard weapons are pretty light, but I see people in SCA do this, and I'm like, I'm gonna break your wrist, and not intentionally, right? Like I'm gonna feel bad. So one thing you can do when you're teaching people like that is be like, all right, so here's some information I've got, right? Be aware that there are better fighters than me. So if someone better than me comes up and has some things that contradict what I'm saying, definitely ask, but they're probably right. But this will still get you further along, right? Before I was a warlord, I said that all the time. I'd be like, here's what I've got to teach. If you run into a warlord and he says something different, he's probably right and I'm not. But I think this is to be a good start. And as far as I know, all this stuff's right. It does work for me, right?
Or couch it with this has worked for me so far. Other people may have different experiences, but this is how I found it so far.
Yeah. And people are going to pick up some wrong things. Like there's a tremendous lore in amp guard of stuff that was either taught wrong and we've learned better since then. People misinterpreted and then made it to a warlord and then taught it to somebody else, right? Like we're doing our best to weed it out, but we don't have peer-reviewed science here.
On that note, this is stupid, but like on the topic of things which are bad, just like objectively, would you say that the amp guard silhouette, which from what I've seen is like this, with the back leg all the way up, that's bad, right?
I mean, if you're fighting, yes, but if
okay,
you're
thank you. I just didn't want to feel crazy because I see so many people go, and I'm like, please keep your back leg on the ground.
You could teach a class on that.
Yeah.
See,
and that's a case where you
in the
can start
foundations
teaching.
class because of that. Right? Yeah.
Foundations.
Or lack thereof. Thank you for coming, everybody. Stay warm.
Pass out notes.
Thank you.